why did she decide to pull the trigger now?
Yeah, look, I think she's an extremely courageous person. I think she's more courageous than anyone else that we've seen in Congress, this Congress. She stood up to both parties last night, right? And she knew what the outcome was going to be, but she did it anyway to force it on the record, right? And the reason why that's extremely courageous is both parties didn't want to actually take the vote that they took last night, right? Because Mike Johnson doesn't want the public to know. He wants to continue to lie to American Republicans and conservatives and claim that he's one of them, right? Mike Johnson doesn't want a record out there that the only reason why he's Speaker of the House is because Democrats tolerate his existence, right? And want his existence. They want him there. Mike Johnson cannot win the speakership. We now have proof of it with only Republican votes. He needs Democrats to get there, and Democrats did what they apparently like to do best, which is bail out Mike Johnson last night, right? And so Mike Johnson's only Speaker of the House because Democrats voted to save him. So we know that because there were 11 Republicans who voted against the motion to table. That's more Republicans that voted against the motion to table when there was the McCarthy ouster effort led by Matt Gaetz. And we also got several other members on record, right? Matt Gaetz is proven to be a fraud, I think, right? Matt Gaetz did all of these things to Kevin McCarthy, and then he issued this frantic statement last night saying that the reason why he voted against Marjorie Taylor Green in this highly successful endeavor to expose the swamp is because he's afraid that the Democrats are going to coerce several establishment Republicans into resigning and lead to Speaker Hakeem Jeffries. Well, the fear that he talks about in his statement, the circumstances haven't changed from when McCarthy was the Speaker in October to today when Mike Johnson's the Speaker. The only difference is the Democrats joined together with the Republican establishment this time to protect Mike Johnson, but they joined with Gaetz last year to take out Kevin McCarthy. So I find it all particularly illuminating, and I know it's frustrating out there for folks, but we do now have the uniparty exposed in Washington, D.C. People can see who they really are, and we have a vote record that lays it all out.
So just because I and others don't know the intricacies of how things work exactly. So she did this motion to vacate. So she's like, I want you gone, Speaker of the House, and we're going to vote on that. And then there was a motion to table, which essentially was to kill Marjorie Taylor Greene's efforts. Did she know that there was immediately going to be a motion to table after she did her thing?
Yes, because we knew how they were talking about what they were going to do. The rules of the House allow any member of the House to call a privileged resolution to force a vote on it with a privileged resolution on a motion to vacate the chair. Any one member can do it, right? And obviously there are 435 members. When you call it privileged, the leadership has to then call it, consider it on the floor within 2 legislative days, right? So they have to consider it either immediately or, within 2 legislative days. And we knew that based off of what Johnson's been saying and his team have been saying publicly that they were going to call this right away. The way they consider it, the first vote is the motion to table, which is to get rid of it, which is what Johnson and his allies put forward. The second vote, if the motion to table had failed, right, as it did in the McCarthy case, it would then go to straight up, should we vacate the chair? If the chair is then vacated, then it goes to the House has to elect a new speaker.
Got it. Okay, I understand that process. The privileged motion, has that always been there, or is that a holdover from when Speaker McCarthy took over with those terms?
It's been different in different Congresses, but that's been there this Congress, right? Like Nancy Pelosi, when she was Speaker, actually raised the threshold, but it's definitely been there in the House rules in one form or another, right? Like it depends on if it's one member or a group of members, or it just depends. So this was
okay,
one of
but it's never been a high threshold, because it seems like Mike Johnson, that would be like priority number one is to get rid of that when he took over. But if it's been a thing that's been around for a long time, then
if it was 5, there were 11 Republicans who voted against it last night. That's embarrassing. Mike Johnson can't be. But we know for a fact now, because one would think that those 11. By the way, when Matt Gaetz did his, 10 Republicans voted against the motion to table, and then 8 Republicans voted to vacate McCarthy, right? Like, so we didn't actually get to the vacate vote, right? Because the Democrats saved Mike Johnson last night and voted to table this to protect him. But one would think that with 11 Republican votes against the motion to table, that those 11 Republicans would have voted to vacate Mike Johnson, right? Like, and so, or at least, more than, because if it was 10-8 last time, 11-8, 11-9, something like that, right? Like most of them probably would. So so the fact is that again, if we got to the actual motion to vacate vote, beyond the table vote, again, Democrats would have saved him, right? Like, so again, Mike Johnson is only Speaker of the House because Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden, who was on TV last night, obviously doing a terrible interview where he threw Israel under the bus. He's just an awful president, and they allow it, right? Like, they want Mike Johnson to be the Speaker of the House. They don't want someone else. And so he's the Democrat Speaker now, right? Like, he's not a Republican anymore. So he's like the Democrat.
Here's what Jeffries said. Yeah, Jeffries says, is this leader of the Democrats in this House, said, even though we are in the minority, speaking of Democrats, we effectively have been governing as if we're in the majority.
Right.
Because we continue to provide a majority of the votes necessary to get things done. Those are just the facts. Okay, so if that's
By the way,
true.
Jeffries isn't wrong. He said that on 60 Minutes. He's not wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like, I wish I could fact check him and say that that's incorrect. It's not. It's true. I mean,
Marjorie Taylor Green
they're good at using their minority, right? Like, they've done, for their purposes.
Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Green put a bunch of bills. She had a bunch of bills here that she listed where, let's see, she says, here's one example. This is the continuing resolution. 207 Democrats and voted for it. Speaker Johnson's continuing resolution. Again, the Republicans are in the majority. 107 Republicans voted for it, but 106 voted against it. Right. But she listed a couple other examples where more Republicans voted against the bill, but it only passed because all the Democrats voted for it too. So the Democrats voted for it, and a few Republicans. Most Republicans were against it.
Yeah, that's called the Hastert rule. The Hastert rule, which comes from the days of Speaker Denny Hastert earlier this century, right? Like, what it is that it holds that a Republican speaker is going to take a piece of legislation to the floor. They will only bring it to the floor and consider it for a vote before the whole House if a majority of Republicans support it. And Republican speakers have long promised to stand by this principle, right? Like, in other words, they understand that there are times when they need to consider a bipartisan piece of legislation, but they'll only do it if a majority of their conference support it, right? And
interesting. And that's not true anymore.
Regardless of the other side, right? Like, but the fact is that John Boehner and Paul Ryan, I believe they violated it a couple of times, and that was the end of them when they did, right? Like, it's verboten to violate the Hastert rule. There are things that Johnson's done that are far, far worse than that Marjorie Taylor Green laid out in that phenomenal motion, and where she read it out as because they had to recognize her, right? Like they didn't have a choice. But again, like I said, the fact is that we knew how the vote was going to pan out, right? Like, and frankly, it might be the best outcome here, right? Like I think that President Trump was right in many respects last night, where he talks about how courageous Marjorie Taylor Green is and how much he likes her. And he thinks that, maybe a motion to vacate will be the right thing to do with Johnson down the road, but maybe not the right time either, right? Like, but the fact is that Johnson is clearly defenestrated now across the Republican Party, right? Like, I mean, he's a total failure as Speaker of the House, and there's a reason why the Democrats want him there, right? Because they're getting.
Well, so that was going to be my question. Like, what? That was going to be my question. And yes, that's true, what you just said. But why wouldn't the Democrats also have liked the chaos? If Trump said, don't do this because it will create chaos, and that would be bad.
I think they made a critical mistake politically, right? Like, so I think that, so I was talking to people about this last night, right? So I understand why they voted to protect him, right? Because they are getting everything they want. But what's happening right now is extremely unpopular, what's passing out of Congress, right? These government funding bills, the government surveillance, the foreign aid, right? Like I saw a poll last night, I think more Americans against, or I think we're sending too much aid to Ukraine than think we're sending the right amount, and like very little think it's not enough. So the fact is that I think that what's passing is extremely unpopular, and now these extremely unpopular things just became the Democrats' problem, right? Like, so they now, when people complain about Congress failing, well, it's the Democrat Party's fault. The Democrat Party just saved Mike Johnson. We offered a Republican pathway out of this mess. It would have been chaotic, sure, but the fact is that he's only Speaker of the House because the Democrats tolerate it and want him there. Now, I think this frees up President Trump in a significant way so that Trump can run against the entire swamp, right? Like, so yeah, Trump and Johnson are friendly, and it is what it is. But the bigger picture here is that the Democrats now own Mike Johnson and all of the failures of everything that's happened the last several months. So while I understand why they would do what they did because they are getting everything they want, they also, I think, made a critical mistake politically here in the long term because, and again, I don't think Johnson's going down anytime soon unless he agrees to resign or something like that. But the fact is that now this whole mess is thanks to the Democrat Party, and we can see it. I think that they had to make that choice, right? They had to make that choice between the chaos and taking ownership of this, and they chose to take ownership of it. And I think it's going to cost them at the end.